Angie here. Thank you so much for joining us. This is part of a series that we're doing for the summer reading program this year, where our very good friend, David Hyde Costello, will be illustrating for us different scenes from the International Folktales that you'll be hearing us tell. So it's going to be me and other people that I work with at the library, lots of friendly faces that I'm sure you've seen before, and we will be telling you stories from the cultures that we belong to. So these are stories that probably you've never heard before, because unless you yourself are from that culture, there wouldn't be any reason for you to know them. So this is part of our Imagine Your Story summer reading program, and that is of course brought to you by the Mass Cultural Council, the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, the MLS, and the Boston Bruins. So now that I got that out of the way, the story that I'll be telling you today is called The Hind of the Golden Apple. And that comes from the culture that I am a part of my heritage, which is Portuguese. My parents were born there. I traveled there all the time. I speak the language. So this is a very interesting story to me, and I've liked it for a very long time, and I want to share it with you. So a little bit of background on this story. The version that I am most familiar with, and that you can find online today if you want to, was published in a collection of folk stories by a scholar who in 1882 went around the country and collected all of these old folk tales and folk stories that had never really been put down or written on paper before, and he put them in a big collection, kind of like what the Grimm brothers did. So if you think of your Grimm fairy stories, so that's a bunch of stories from a particular region all put together and published. It's kind of like that, but with Portuguese ones. So this version, fortunately, if you don't read Portuguese, has been translated into English, and like I said, you can find it online whenever you want to. And the story I'm going to be telling you, like I said, is called The Hind of the Golden Apple. Now, hind is a word that you may never have heard before, but all it means is a deer. So if you've ever seen Bambi, you know what a hind looks like, because it's a deer. So without further ado, I'm going to take it away. So once upon a time, there lived a woman and her son, and they were very poor, and they lived on the edge of a forest. And in this forest, the boy would have to go into it every day to forage for food and chop wood to keep him and his mother warm and to cook on and things of that nature. It was a very hard life, and they worked very hard, but they never really had enough to survive on, so they were always struggling. One day, when the boy was in the forest chopping some wood, he saw a hind approach him. Now, she was unlike any hind that he'd ever seen before. She was very, very small, and she was very beautiful. And around her neck, she had the most extraordinary golden apple on a silver chain. So the hind went up to him and she asked, "Boy, what are you doing?" Now, the boy was surprised. He'd never heard a hind speak before. And he said, "Well, I'm chopping wood for my mother to keep us warm, and so we have a fire to cook on." And he explained how poor they were and how hard everything was for him and how everything was a struggle. And the hind said to him, "Come with me to my lair, and I will give you all the gold that you need." Before the boy could say anything, he heard a voice that said, "Do not take anything from her." Well, the boy was surprised, but he decided that he was going to do as the voice said, and he turned to the hind and said, "Well, thank you very much. I'm very touched by your generosity, but I couldn't take anything. Thank you, but no." The hind again turned to him and said, "Come with me, boy. Come to my lair and take all the gold and jewels that you will need. You'll be very happy." The voice again said, "Do not take anything from her at all. Instead, ask her for the golden apple that she has around her neck." Well, the boy figured he'd listen to the voice again and said, "Hind, thank you, but I don't wish for gold. What I do wish is for the apple on a silver chain that is hanging from around your neck. That is the only thing I wish to possess." So the hind, having been asked, had to give him the apple. So she bent her head down, took it off, and said, "Take it then." Now, the moment the boy grabbed the apple, he opened it. He cut it in half. And when the apple opened up, 4 giants emerged in a puff of smoke. And the leader of the giants said to him, "What do you want us to do?" Now the boy, having no other thought in his mind, said, "I wish that you take all of this wood I've been working all day on, chopping up and stacking and bring it back to my mother's house. I want so much wood for her that she doesn't know where to put it or what to do with it." So the giants did as they were asked. They stacked and moved the wood to the boy's mother's house. So much wood she didn't know what to do with it, and she never was cold in the night again. The boy opened the apple a second time. And again the 4 giants emerged and said, "What do you want us to do?" The boy thought, and he said, "I want a castle, and I want a princess inside it, and I want all the food that you can eat, and all the attendants, and everything else it requires." So the giants immediately got to work. They started building the most magnificent castle on the beach, right on the shingle, overlooking the water. And inside, when the boy was able to walk through the doors, there was the most beautiful princess he'd ever seen. The boy, wanting to keep the apple on the silver chain safe, gave it to the princess to wear around her neck. Some time passed, and they all lived very happily. But like in a lot of these stories, there was a man who saw what the boy had, and he wanted it for himself. So this man, this jealous man who was very envious, went to a witch that he knew about, and he said to the witch what his intentions were. He said that he wanted the apple. The witch, who was very clever, came up with a plan. And so one day, a very old woman, who we know was the witch, came to the castle gates asking for food. And she, of course, was let inside, and they fed her everything she wanted, and the boy and the princess were very, very kind to her. And the old woman said that she'd never seen a golden apple on a chain such as the one the princess had, and would she mind if she could hold it? The youth and the princess said of course she could. So the princess removed it from her neck and handed it to the old woman. Now the old woman snatched it, and the witch, the moment she had it in her hand, fled. And as soon as she crossed the gates of the castle, everything that the boy had turned into a puff of smoke. He and his princess were standing in rags, in the cold, on the shingle, with no castle in sight. And they were both, of course, very, very upset, because everything that they ever had been taken from them. So the boy said to his wife, he said, "Princess, it's best, I think, if you go home to your father, the king. I will remain here until I can figure out what to do, and then I will come for you." The princess, of course, said that she would be waiting for him, and she went back home to the house of her father, the king. The boy, for nothing else to do, started to walk down the beach, wondering and racking his brain. How would he solve this problem? Where did it go? How could he get it back? When he came upon a woman, a very old woman, who was sitting on a rock. Now this woman, we know, was the Virgin Mary, but the boy did not recognize her. He just saw an old woman. And Our Lady said to him, "Where are you going?" And the boy, because he needed to talk to somebody, told her everything that had happened, told her about his castle and the princess and the apple, and how it had just been stolen and he didn't know what to do. Our Lady nodded and said, "Continue along this path. When you come up to a group of cats, you will see that they are the finest, healthiest cats you've ever seen. Don't take any of them. Keep searching until you find one that is thin and covered with sores and really very pitiful. She is the one that you seek." The boy thought about what she said for a while, and having always received good advice from the voice before, went along the path. And he did, just as she said, come upon a very large group of cats, and each and every one of them was more beautiful and healthy than the last. Shiny coats, playful, but the boy overlooked them all. They weren't the one he needed. Eventually, there was a tiny cat who was very small and really pitiful looking, and she was the one that he came to and picked up by the scruff of her neck and cradled in his shirt. As he was walking down the beach with the cat tucked into his shirt, eventually the boy came across a town that had a bunch of docks and was a port. So there was a grand ship sitting in the harbor, and that boy thought, maybe that'll give me a way to travel. So the boy went to the sailors working on that ship at the quayside, and he said to them, "Can I come aboard your ship. I don't need a lot, but I will work as hard as you need me I will work as hard as you need me to. And then the sailors, who said that he was a good, he looked healthy and he clearly was a hard-working boy, went to their captain to ask if he could become a member of their crew. Now this captain was the same man who stole the apple from the boy just days before. The boy did not know this, so when he was brought before the captain immediately recognized him and told his crew to arrest him and throw him in jail. So the crew did. Obviously there was some reason that he couldn't be around. The boy, because the cat was in his shirt, was able to smuggle her with him into the jail. The jailer that was responsible for giving them food was very, very cruel, and he would only ever bring the boy and the cat 1 bean a day. Now the boy, who was very hungry but had very good manners, took that bean and cut it in half. Half he would eat and half he gave to the cat. Although they both knew this wasn't enough for them to survive. The cat, who though she was little, was very clever and a very good hunter. So she would go out and she would hunt for mice and rats and anything else that she could get as prey, and she would bring them back to the boy. And now the cat, who had very good manners indeed, would take half of what she caught and eat it herself and give half to the youth. And in this way, they were both very healthy. They both ate enough and didn't starve. Now, the boy was trapped for so long and the cat was so good at hunting that one day the king of the rats realized that all of his subjects were under siege, that this cat, who was such a good hunter, was really putting his kingdom at risk. So the king of the rat put a note in front of the door of the cell that the boy and the cat were in. So as the cat was peeking one day, looking for prey to come by, she saw instead that folded note. She meowed very loudly, letting the boy know that there was something here, something to come look. The boy arrived, wondering what had gone wrong, and saw the paper. Inside, the king of the rats had asked the boy, what is it that he could do for him? What is it that the boy needed or wanted so that this assault on the subjects of the rat kingdom would stop? The boy thought, and he sent a note back to the rat king and he said, all that I wish is for the apple that was stolen to be returned. So the king of the rats mustered his people into an army and looked all over the world for the man with the golden apple around his neck. And they found him. So the rats, who were very cunning and very crafty, crept on board the man's ship, who was sitting in a harbor. And they watched and waited for their opportunity. The man, who didn't want to be tricked like the boy had been tricked, wore the apple on the silver chain around his neck and never let it out of his sight. So, when that man fell asleep with the apple around his neck, the rats crept in on either side of his bed and they waited. The littlest rat crept up the man's body, up onto his chest, and he tickled the man's nose with the tip of his tail. He was trying to make him sneeze, you see, and wake up so that the man would lift his head and try and remove whatever it was that was bothering him in the night. So, as the littlest rat is tickling the man's nose, eventually, the man, he lets out a great sneeze and lifts his head. And in that moment, the rats all struck. They descended and lifted the chain from over the man's head and fled the ship. Now, the rats were coming with the apple on top of them in a grand parade back to the jail cell where the boy and the cat were still trapped. The rat king at the head. The cat saw them coming and started to meow very loudly, waking the boy up. The boy went to see what was the matter with her. Was she okay? And when the rat king emerged with the apple on its chain, the boy took it and was overjoyed. So for the third time, the boy opened the apple in half, and the 4 giants, just as before, emerged. "What do you want us to do?" they said. The boy looked at them and said, "I want my princess, my castle, my attendants, and everything back the way that it was. The giants immediately started to work, and they rebuilt everything back on the shingle overlooking the sea. And the boy went to the house of the king, where his princess was waiting. And he said to the king, "Sire, I have been wronged by a very bad man. Would you take vengeance on him? Would you punish him?" So the king, listening to his son-in-law and understanding what had happened, found the jealous man, and he was never seen again. The boy left the king's palace with his princess and went back into his own castle. So the boy, the princess, and the cat, who lived a very long life and was very happy, stayed in that castle the rest of their days. And so they lived happily ever after. So that's the end of the story. What did you think? So there was a little twist in there that I didn't let you guys know about before, because I like it to be a surprise. But in that story, when the boy is walking along the beach, he actually bumps into the Virgin Mary, and she's the one who points him on the way to find the cat that will eventually help him. Now, in most fairy stories, that figure is where you'll have your fairy godmother or a spirit or the other magical element of some kind. And what's interesting about this story is that it was a Catholic figure. It was the Virgin. So the reason behind that, broadly speaking, is Portugal itself has been a Catholic country for such a long time. We're talking like solid 1,000 years, that a lot of the folk stories, as they have been passed down to us, because all of these for a very long time were just in what we would call an oral tradition, which means I tell the story to you and then you tell the story to someone else, and that's how the story survives. Because they weren't written down, they changed over time, like a game of telephone. So as the Roman Catholic Church became really important, a lot of the folktales and the figures in the folktales that used to be magical, you know, creatures of the fields and the forests and, you know, whatever the ancient deities were replaced by Catholic figures, by angels and saints and that sort of thing. And the same thing is present in this story, which kind of throws you for a loop when you're listening to it, because you're definitely not thinking about religion. And yet, there it turns up. So that's just something that I thought was pretty interesting and that probably you'd never heard before. So that's the story of the Hind and the Golden Apple from My Heritage, Portugal. And as with all of the videos that we're doing this summer, because it's going to be online, we really, really please ask that you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And the reason for this is that we want to make sure that you are aware of everything we've got going on. So when you hit that like and subscribe button, there's a little tiny bell that's right next to it. Click that bell and move the notifications to all, so that way you're kind of telling YouTube that, yes, I really want to know what this channel is doing. So anything that Mr. Dan might be doing, other performances we've got going on, if you ring that bell and hit that subscribe button, you'll be notified for all of them. So again, my name is Miss Angie from the Palmer Public Library. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.